Good morning, everybody. We are starting today with Shrimad Bhagavata Mahapurana, Book 11, Discourse 5. This is finishing up the conversation being related by Narada about the questions of the Rajanimi to 9 sages. So Discourse 5 is entitled The Fate of Non-Devotees, Different Methods of the Lord's Worship According to the Different Yugas. The Rajanimi submitted, O jewels among those who have realized the self, what will be the fate of those who do not generally adore Lord Srihari, and whose desires have not been satiated, and whose mind and senses are uncontrolled? Chamasa replied. So Chamasa is one of these visiting philosophers who we have not yet heard from. From the mouth, arms, thighs, and feet of the Lord were evolved the 4 Varanas, along with the 4 ashramas, or stages in life. And they were distinctly divided into Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, according to their gunas, according to the qualities of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, and their different combinations in different people's natures. Among all of these, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, or Shudras, they who do not adore the Supreme Person, though knowing him to be their direct originator and ruler and ignore him, fall from their status and go down toward Naraka. Many women, Shudras, and others are remote from hearing the Lord's stories or discourses on them, and also from singing his praises, and deserve to be pitied by devotees like you. It should be your duty to bring them to the right path. Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas stand near to the feet of Srihari by virtue of their birth and Vedic sanskaras, the ceremonies for the twice-born, yet they get misguided by the Vedas as they miss their real meaning and interpret them literally about the fruits of actions. Meaning, interpret them literally as being primarily about the fruits of actions. They do not know the secret of action. Though foolish, they consider themselves learned and become conceited. They indulge in fine talk and are fascinated by the honeyed words describing the transient fruit of actions. Being dominated by rajas, they resolve upon cruel deeds. Their desire for pleasures is insatiable. Their anger is like that of a serpent, and they love ostentation and show pride. Such sinners laugh at the devotees of the Lord. Living in homes where sexual pleasures predominate, they remain devoted to women and talk among themselves of the pleasures of sense. They perform sacrifices without observing the rules, and without distributing food and giving money to the Brahmanas, and only kill animals for sustenance, not realizing the sin involved in destruction of life. Blinded with pride born of their wealth and power, pedigree and learning, munificence, comeliness of form, physical strength and actions, those wicked men despise not only the saintly who are beloved of Srihari, but the Lord himself. Those fools do not heed what the Vedas say about the Lord, that like the sky, he is eternally present in all creatures as their very self, and as the ultimate object of all human pursuits. They interpret the Vedas as discussing only the objects of desire. Man is naturally inclined towards the enjoyment of sexual pleasure, flesh, and wine. No rules enjoin him to indulge in them. A certain check is provided over these tendencies by the Shastra, by permitting sexual intercourse with one's wedded wife, meat eating at the end of an animal sacrifice, drinking of wine during a Sautramani sacrifice. The real intention of the Shastra is to turn man away from them, but gradually. The only fruit of wealth is dharma, or piety, which gives knowledge and direct realization and forthwith leads to supreme peace or liberation. Those who use wealth solely for their own comfort or of their family forget death, the formidable enemy of their body. They do not understand the pure essence of their dharma. Only the smelling of wine is sanctioned, and a Sautramani sacrifice, an animal sacrifice, is allowed for the adoration of the deities, and it is not permissible to kill animals for meat. Similarly, sexual relation with one's wife is allowed with the motive of getting an issue and not for the sake of enjoyment. Those who are ignorant of this real dharma, and though wicked and haughty account themselves virtuous, kill animals without any feeling of remorse or fear of punishment, and are devoured by those very animals in their next birth. Those who hate others, in whom also dwells the same self or Hari, hate Hari himself, and being deeply attached to their mortal body and other relations, fall into Naraka through their acts of hatred. Those who have not attained the knowledge of real truth but have passed the stage of utter ignorance and are attached to the threefold objects of existence, but have no time to pursue the path of liberation, are sure to bring about their ruin. They kill their own self through killing other animals, and being devoid of peace of mind, regard ignorance as knowledge. They do not experience fulfillment, and being frustrated in their aims and thwarted by the time spirit, become miserable. Those who are averse to the Lord are obliged against their will to forsake their home, wealth, children, and friends, gained with great difficulty, and enter the darkness of Naraka. The Raja Nimi submitted, "Pray tell us now, in which ages, assuming what forms and colors, and by what names the Lord is known, and by what prescribed rites he is worshipped by men?" The sage Karabhajana replied, "Lord Keshava, in the ages of Satya, Treta, Dvapara, and Kali, assumes different colors, names, and forms, and is worshipped in different modes. In the Satya Yuga, the Lord is of white complexion, has 4 arms, wears matted locks, and is clad in barks and deerskin. He puts on the sacred thread and carries a mala of rudraksha and a staff and a kamandalu water pot made of a wild coconut shell. In that yuga, men have, as a matter of fact, a calm mind, entertain no feeling of animosity towards anybody, and are friendly towards all creatures. They look upon all with an equal eye. They propitiate the Lord by their tapas and by their control of mind and the senses. In the Satya Yuga, the Lord is called by the names of Hansa, Suparna, Vaikunta, Dharma, Yogeshvara, Amala, Ishvara, Purusha, Avyakta, and Paramatma. In the age of Treta, the Lord is of crimson hue. He has 4 arms, wears a triple cord about his loins, and has golden locks. He appears in the form of sacrifices as described in the 3 Vedas, and wields on his person a sruk, srava. The sruk and srava are ladles for pouring ghee into the sacred fire. It's like a spoon and a deeper ladle that you put a few spoonfuls of ghee in, and then the srava has like a groove for a lot of ghee flowing in a steady stream into the fire when you tip it at an angle. And other accessories used in the performance of sacrifices. In that age, pious men who are teachers of the Vedas worship through the Vedic lore Lord Sri Hari as an embodiment of all the deities. In that age of Treta, he is called by the names of Vishnu, Yajna, Prishnigarbha, Sarvadeva, Urukrama, Prashakapi, Jayanta, and Urugaya. In the Dvapara Yuga, the Lord is of a dark complexion, remains clad in yellow silk, wields his own weapons and emblems, the conch, discus, mace, and lotus, wears the Kaustubha gem, and is distinguished by the marks of Srivatsa, etc. In that Yuga, O Raja, men seeking to know the ultimate reality worship the Supreme Person who is characterized by the regalia proper to a monarch, such as the umbrella, the fly whisk, etc., as indicated in the Vedas and the Tantras. Hail to you, Vasudeva, hail to Sankarshana, and hail to you, the Almighty Lord, as Pradyumna and Aniruddha. Hail to the sage Narayana, the Almighty, all-pervading, all-embodying ruler of the universe, dwelling in the heart of all. O Raja, it is thus that people adore and praise the Lord of the universe in the Dvapara Yuga. Hear how they worship him with various rituals prescribed by the Tantras during the Kali Yuga. It is well known that wise men worship through sacrifices, mostly consisting of chanting the names of the Lord and singing his praises. The Lord, who is of a dark color, though bright by luster. So in other words, the color is dark, but he has a shiningness to him that is bright. Perfect in all limbs, adorned with ornaments, furnished with his weapons, and waited upon by his attendants. O the most exalted person, O the protector of devotees, I bow to your lotus feet, which are worthy of being constantly meditated upon. Put an end to all discomfiture, yield all desired boons, which are the focus of all sacred places, are extolled by Shiva and Brahma, afford shelter to all and dispel the distress of devotees, and which serve as a bark, as in a boat, for crossing the ocean of mundane existence. O the most exalted and righteous person, I bow to thy lotus feet, which ran after the illusory deer sought after by thy beloved one. You resigned the royal fortune, which was coveted by the gods and was most difficult to forsake, at the word of your father, and went away to the forest. Thus, O Raja, Lord Sri Hari, the bestower of blessings, is worshipped by men belonging to different yugas under a name and form appropriate to the age. Elderly and discriminating persons who appreciate the merits of the Kali Yuga and choose the essence of things extol this yuga, in which, by merely chanting the names of the Lord, one can attain all the desired objects. For men lost in this world, indeed, there is no higher gain than the chanting of his names, whereby one attains to perfect peace, and is a sequel to which the cycle of birth and death comes to an end. O Raja, those living in the ages of Satya, Treta, and Dvapara seek birth in the Kali Yuga. O Maharaja, in the Kali Yuga, here and there men will be devoted to Lord Narayana, but their number will be large in the Dravida territory, wherein flow the rivers Tamraparni, Kratamala, Payasvini, the most sacred Kaveri, Mahanadi, and Pratichi. So this is referring to South India specifically, the Dravida territories down in the southern region of India. O Maharaja, men who drink their waters generally become pure-minded devotees of Lord Vasudeva. O Raja, renouncing all obligation or the notion of separateness from the Lord, he who wholeheartedly and completely resorts for protection to the protecting Lord is no more a servant of or a debtor to the deities, rishis, or other creatures, relations, or other men, or deceased ancestors. Such a person discharges all his responsibilities merely by seeking refuge in the Lord. If a beloved devotee who has forsaken all other attachments and sought shelter in the soles of feet of the Lord incurs any sin for any reason, the Supreme Lord, Sri Hari, enshrined in his heart, washes off all that sin. The sage Narada resumed, hearing of these courses of conduct pleasing to the Lord, Nimi, the Raja of Mithila, with his priests and gurus, delightedly adored the sons of Jayanti, the 9 sages. Then those accomplished sages vanished out of sight while all the people stood looking on. Following the aforesaid courses of conduct, the Raja attained to the highest goal. O Vasudeva, the best among fortunate persons, since it is to Vasudeva, Krishna's father, that Narada has been telling this story. Following these righteous courses pleasing to the Lord, which you have heard of, full of faith and free from attachment, you too will attain the highest goal. The fame of you both, husband and wife, really fills the world because the Almighty Lord Sri Hari has chosen to be your son. Cherishing parental love for Sri Krishna, you have both purified your soul by his sight, embrace, and conversation with him, as well as by sitting, sleeping, and eating with him. When even Shishupala, Pondraka, Shalva, and other kings thinking of him with the feeling of enmity while sleeping, sitting, or eating, had his gait, his graceful movements and glances, etc., imprinted on their mind because they were obsessing about him through hatred, and accordingly attained similarity to his form. What to say of those whose mind is attached to him in a loving way? Sri Krishna is the universal soul, the Almighty Lord. Though he has concealed his divinity by assuming a human personality as a matter of Leela, he is above and beyond all and is immortal. You should not look upon him as your son. To destroy the devilish kings who had become a burden to the earth and to protect the virtuous, Sri Krishna has appeared on earth. It is for the liberation of all men that he spreads his fame throughout the world. Sri Shuka continued. Hearing this, the highly fortunate Vasudeva and Devaki felt much astonished, and they overcame their infatuation and ceased to look upon Sri Krishna as a mortal. Whoever with a concentrated mind retains in his memory this sacred story shakes off his delusion during his lifetime and becomes qualified for attaining oneness with Brahman. Thus ends the 5th discourse in Book 11 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 6. The gods entreat the Lord to return to his divine realm, and Uddhava approaches him on the eve of the Yadu's departure for Prabhasa. Sri Shuka began again. Now, when Narada had finished his discourse to Vasudeva and left Dwaraka, Brahma, surrounded by his sons, the gods and the lords of creation, arrived, and so did Lord Shiva, the ruler of those that have gone by, as well as those that are yet to come, accompanied by Bhutaganas. The glorious Indra, with the Maruts, the 49 wind gods, the Adityas, the 8 Vasus, the 2 Ashvins, the Ribhus, the Angiras, the 11 Rudras, the class of gods known as the Vishvedevas, and the Sadhyas, Gandharvas, Apsaras, Nagas, Siddhas, Charanas, and Guhyakas, Rishis as well as Pitris, accompanied by Vidyadharas and Kinnaras, all went to Dwaraka, eager to see Sri Krishna, who captivated the mind of the human race, and that charming form by which he spread in all the worlds a glory that destroyed the sins of the whole universe. In that brilliant city, abounding in all kinds of superior wealth, they saw Sri Krishna of wonderful beauty with unsatiated eyes. Covering Sri Krishna, the foremost among the Adus, with flowers that can be had in heaven alone, they praised the Lord of the universe by means of laudatory hymns couched in charming words and full of charming ideas. The gods said, "With our reason and senses, body, mind, and speech, O Lord, we bow to your lotus feet, which are meditated upon in the heart by those who are full of devotion and seek to be freed from the stout shackles of karma. O invincible Lord, presiding over the gunas born of your Maya, you create, preserve, and destroy this manifest, inconceivable universe in yourself through your Maya consisting of the 3 gunas, and yet remain ever unaffected by these actions, being free from blemish. And since you remain completely absorbed of the unobscured bliss which constitutes your very nature. O praiseworthy and supreme Lord, purification of men of impure mind is not so radically effected through worship, study of scriptures, acts of charity, austerities, ritual acts, etc., as of pure-minded persons through mature and genuine faith developed by constant hearing in your glory. May your feet serve as a fire to consume all our unholy cravings, the feet which are being contemplated upon with a heart moistened with love by ascetics for the sake of blessedness, which are worshipped by devotees through individual divine manifestations, for attaining a glory similar to that of the Lord, and by the wise 3 times a day, in order that they may transcend heaven, which are contemplated, O Lord, in the sacrificial fire, taking in their outstretched hands the material for being consigned to that fire according to the procedure laid down by the 3 Vedas, Riksama and Yajus, and which are contemplated in the course of their yogic practice for the realization of the self, by strivers seeking to obtain an insight into the Maya that veils the true character of the spirit, and are worshipped everywhere by the highest devotees of the Lord. Like a co-wife, this divine Sri, the goddess of fortune, appearing as a golden streak on your bosom, O Lord, lies even with a faded garland of sylvan flowers, adorning your bosom along with her. You accept the worship duly offered to you by your loving devotees, even with such a garland. In other words, even with a faded garland, despite having all the attentions of the goddess Lakshmi. May your feet serve as a fire to consume our evil tendencies. O almighty and omnipresent Lord, may your foot cleanse our sins who worship you, the foot which took 3 strides in order to measure the 3 worlds, and on reaching Satyaloka stood like a tall triumphal flag, with the Ganga flowing through the 3 worlds as its streamer, and as such inspired terror and instilled fearlessness into the Asuric and the Daivic armies, respectively, and which brought heaven to the righteous and spelt ruin to the unrighteous. May the feet of the Supreme Person in you augment our joy, you who are superior both to Prakriti and Purusha, and who are the propeller of all, and subject to whose control, like bulls held by the nose string, are Brahma and other embodied souls who are being tormented by one another. You are Purushottama, the highest person, and that you are responsible for the creation, continuance, and destruction of this universe. The Vedas speak of you as the controller of Prakriti, Purusha, and the Mahattattva, and you are also Kala, consisting of 3 navels, engaged in the destruction of all and possessed of imperceptible speed. The 3 navels are the 3 divisions of the year into 3 categories. Having derived its power from you and acquiring unfailing energy, the Purusha, in conjunction with Maya, deposited the Mahattattva, corresponding as it were to the seed of this universe. Equipped with that power, the Mahat produced out of itself the Hiranyagarbha, the golden egg of the universe, enveloped by its 7 external sheaths, which are the sheaths of earth, water, fire, air, akasha, ego, and mind. Therefore, O propeller of the Indriyas, you are the suzerain ruler of the immobile as well as the mobile creation, because even though enjoying the objects of the senses evolved through the modification of the gunas brought about by Maya, you remain unattached to them. While others, the jivas, remain afraid of sense enjoyments even when they have been renounced by themselves because of their power of temptation. Your 16,000 and odd wives could not even shake your mind by their shafts of kama and other charms skilled in conveying the message of love dispatched by their arched eyebrows, fascinating with the sentiment expressed by their suppressed smile and sidelong glances. The streams bearing the water of your nectar-like stories and rivers that have washed your feet are capable of destroying the sins of the three worlds. Those who take pains for the purification of their self resort to both these types of holy waters, the former in the form of your glory sung in the Vedas by means of their ears, and the latter, emanating from your feet, in other words, literal waters like the Ganga, through the contact of their body. Sri Shuka resumed, having thus extolled and bowed low to Sri Hari, along with the other gods, Brahma, accompanied by Lord Shiva and standing in the air all the while, submitted to Sri Krishna, the protector of cows. Brahma said, formerly you were entreated by us to remove the burden of the earth, O Lord. That has been accomplished, precisely as was desired by us, O inner controller of all. Righteousness has been firmly established by you, among the virtuous pledged to truth and glory, which is capable of destroying the sins of all men, diffused on all sides. Descending in the line of Yadu and manifesting a form unsurpassed in elegance, you performed deeds of extraordinary valor for the good of the world. Hearing of and celebrating, O Lord, those exploits of yours that have been mentioned heretofore, pious men in the Kali Yuga shall easily get through the darkness of ignorance. A century and 25 years more have elapsed, O Lord, since you appeared in the race of Yadu, O Supreme Person. O support of the universe, no part of the God's purpose now remains to be accomplished, and this race of yours has become well nigh extinct, meaning is about to become extinct, through the curse of the Brahmanas. Therefore, return, if you please, O Vishnu, to your transcendent realm, Vaikunta, and bless us, your servants, the guardians of the spheres, along with the spheres themselves, by visiting our realms and accepting our homage. The glorious Lord replied, what you say has already been decided upon by me, O ruler of the gods. All your purpose has been accomplished and the burden of the earth removed. Made insolent by prowess, heroism, and fortune, and inclined to take possession of the whole world, this celebrated race of Yadu has been kept in check by me, as the ocean by its shore. If I depart from this world without destroying the huge race of the Yadus who have grown so insolent, this entire human race will meet its destruction through this ocean that has already transgressed its limits. The destruction of this race has already begun through the imprecation of the Brahmanas. When its destruction is complete, O sinless Brahma, I shall ascend to your realm en route to my own realm. Sri Shuka continued, thus told by the Lord of the universe, the god Brahma, the self-born, fell prostrate before him and duly returned to his realm, along with the host of the gods. Presently noticing grave portents appearing over the city of Dwaraka, the Lord spoke to the elderly among the Yadus that had assembled. The Lord said, these exceptionally grave portents are particularly appearing on all sides here, and a curse from the Brahmanas that cannot be easily overcome has overtaken our race. We should no longer stay here if we wish to live on, O respected ones. We shall shift this very day to Prabhasa, a most sacred place. Let there be no delay. Having bathed there, the moon god, the ruler of the stars, who had been seized with tuberculosis due to a curse pronounced by Daksha, was at once rid of his trouble and began to enjoy once more the waxing of his digits as before. Having bathed in the sacred waters there and gratified the Pitris and gods with offerings of water, fed good Brahmanas with delicious food of various tastes, and bestowed valuable gifts on those worthy ones, we shall through those gifts get over our sins, even as people cross over the ocean with the help of ships. Sri Shuka went on. Thus directed by the Lord, O delight of your race, the Yadavas made up their mind. to undertake a journey to the sacred place of Prabhasa, and began to get ready their chariots. Seeing this and overhearing the utterance of the Lord and observing the fearful portents, Uddhava, who was ever devoted to Sri Krishna, approached the suzerain Lord of the universe in seclusion. In other words, one-on-one, just Uddhava and Krishna. And touching his feet with his head, submitted to him with joined palms. Uddhava said, O ruler even of the adored of gods, O master of yoga, the very hearing and chanting of whose names and praises makes one sacred. Having exterminated this race, you are surely going to leave this world for good. As is evident from the fact that you did not choose to counteract the Brahmana's curse, though able to do so, almighty as you are. I cannot bear to abandon your lotus feet even for half a second, O ruler of Brahma and Lord Shiva. Kindly, therefore, take me as well to your divine realm, O Lord. Having enjoyed the story of your extraordinary leelas, which is most auspicious to hear, and as sweet as nectar to the ear, people give up the craving for other objects. How then could we do without you, our beloved one, nay, our very self, we who have constantly waited on you while you lay in bed, sat or rambled with us, stood beside us, bathed in our company, or engaged in some sport, or dined with us, and so on. We are your servants, who have been adorned with garlands, sandal paste, raiments, and ornaments, used and given up by you, and ate the remnants of your food. As such, we shall conquer your Maya. We are not afraid of your Maya, but of separation from you. Sages who have absolutely no covering on their body beyond the belt of air about their loins, have taken great pains on devotions, are lifelong and perfect celibates. Literally what it says is, have directed the flow of their generative fluid upwards and stopped its downward flow for all time to come, are free from passion, have renounced enjoyments of the outer senses, and have no trace of impurity left in their mind. They attain to your glorious state known by the name of Brahman. We, however, O supreme yogi, even though we are revolving in the alleys of karma in this world, shall get over the darkness of ignorance, which is difficult to surmount, through talks about you carried on with your devotees, dwelling upon and celebrating your doings and utterances, your gait, smiles, glances, and jokes, and whatever you did in imitation of human beings. Sri Shuka said, entreated thus, O Raja, Lord Sri Krishna, the son of Devaki, spoke to his beloved servant and absolute devotee Uddhava. Thus ends the 6th discourse in Book 11 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. And with Discourse 7, we commence what's often called the Uddhava Gita, which is second only to the Bhagavad Gita in the fame of Krishna's teachings. Very often people study the Uddhava Gita just by itself, out of context of the rest of the Bhagavatam. The Uddhava Gita being Krishna's last spiritual teachings to Uddhava. Discourse 7, the legend of an ascetic, the story of 8 out of 24 gurus recognized by him. The glorious Lord began again. That alone which you have asked me, O highly blessed one, is intended by me. Brahma the creator, Lord Shiva the source of the universe, and the other guardians of the spheres, long for my presence in heaven. Indeed, I have wholly accomplished the purpose of the gods, the removal of the earth's burden, for which, as requested by Brahma, I descended on this earth with my part manifestation Balarama. This race of Yadu, which is the only surviving burden on the earth and has already been consumed by the curse of the Brahmanas, will surely perish through mutual strife. And on the 7th day, meaning the 7th day from today, when he said this, the sea will overflow and submerge this city of Dwaraka. The moment this mortal world is forsaken by me, it will be assailed by Kali, and before long, O pious one, all its auspiciousness will be gone. You should in no case live on this terrestrial globe when abandoned by me, for the Kali Yuga having set in then, O good Uddhava, people will conceive a liking for unrighteous ways. Completely shaking off all attachment for your own people and kinsmen and fully concentrating your mind on me. For your part, go you about the earth, looking upon all with an equal eye. Whatever is being apprehended with the mind, speech, eyes, ears, etc., know it to be a creation of the mind, and therefore merely illusory and transient. A man with an unsteady, wandering mind falls a prey to misapprehension consisting in the perception of diversity, which leads to the sense of good and evil. And in the eyes of an individual having the notion of good and evil, there exists the distinction of prescribed action, inaction, and prohibited action. Therefore, having controlled your mind and senses, visualize this world as projected in the self, and see your own self existing in me, the Supreme Lord, as one with me. Possessed of knowledge and realization, and with your mind sated through self-realization, and becoming one with the self of all embodied beings, you will no longer be balked by impediments. He who has transcended the sense of good and evil does not refrain from wrongdoing because he perceives any evil in it, nor does he perform prescribed duties because he thinks well of it. He merely acts by force of habit, like a child whose actions are not premeditated. He who has gained certitude about the self through knowledge of the true spirit of the Vedas, coupled with realization of the truth, who is a friend to all created beings, who is full of peace, and who beholds the universe as one with me, never undergoes suffering. Sri Shuka resumed. Thus instructed by the Lord, Uddhava, the great devotee of the Lord, a protector of men, fell prostrate before him, and being eager to know the truth, spoke to him. Uddhava submitted. O Lord of Yoga, O the ultimate end and support of yoga, O the embodiment of yoga, O the fountainhead of yoga, for my highest good, it is for my highest good that this cult of renunciation, without any expectation of return, has been preached by you. O all-pervading and all-embracing Lord, such renunciation of the pleasures of sense is difficult, indeed, well nigh impossible for those attached to sense enjoyment, and more so for those who are not devoted to you, such is my conviction. I am ignorant, O Lord, for I am attached to this body and children, which are the creation of your Maya. I am immersed in the notion of I and mine. Therefore instruct me, your servant, that I may easily attain to that renunciation which has been taught by you. O Lord, I do not see, except you, anyone, even among the celestials, who can give me instruction about the self-revealed Atma, the only truth. Even Brahma and all these beings are deluded by your Maya as they look upon external things as real. Therefore, afflicted as I am with sorrows and with my mind turned away from the world, O Lord, I seek refuge in you, who are Lord Narayana, the friend of all living beings, devoid of all defects, eternal and infinite, omniscient, the supreme ruler of all, whose abode is the eternal Vaikunta. The Lord replied, in this world, those who are engaged in investigating the true nature of this world often lift themselves up by their own efforts and rid themselves of the craving for the pleasures of sense. The Atma itself is indeed the guide of one's own self, especially in the case of man, inasmuch as by direct perception and inference, he can work out his own good. In their human birth, persons of ripe judgment and knowing the secret of Sankhya and Yoga directly and clearly perceive me as their own self, endowed with all faculties. Numerous forms of living beings with 1 foot, with 2, 3, 4, or many feet, and also without feet, stand evolved by me. Of them, the human body is most dear to me. And here, those who are ever vigilant directly discover me, the supreme ruler, who cannot be perceived by ordinary means of perception, through assumption based on evidences in the shape of material instruments, which are open to perception, as well as through inference on the same grounds. By way of an illustration on this subject, they narrate the following ancient legend, in the form of a dialogue between an ascetic of a high order and Yadu, of great prowess and intelligence. Perceiving a youthful Brahmana with an unclean body, though full of wisdom, roaming about fearlessly, Yadu, who knew what is dharma, put questions to him. And the commentators on the Bhagavatam generally agree that this youthful Brahmana of unclean body roaming about was Lord Dattatreya, who has been mentioned before. Yadu said, remaining inactive, O Brahmana sage, whence did you get this highly penetrating wisdom, obtaining which you, though enlightened, go about the world like an innocent boy? Generally, men strive after dharma, artha, and kama, as well as after self-inquiry, only from the motive of acquiring longevity, renown, and fortune. You for yourself are able-bodied, learned, skillful, good-looking, and sweet-tongued. Nevertheless, you do nothing, covet nothing, and behave like a dunce, a maniac, or a devil. In the midst of people burning with the wildfire of concupiscence and greed, you remain unscathed by that fire, do not get scorched by it, like an elephant standing in the water of the Ganga. Tell us who are making this inquiry, O Brahmana, the cause of the joy abiding in your mind, even though you are living singly and are devoid of enjoyment of the pleasures of sense. The glorious Lord said, thus honored and questioned by Yadu, who was exceptionally intelligent and devoted to the Brahmanas, the highly blessed Brahmana sage addressed Yadu, who stood bent low with humility. The Brahmana said, many are my gurus, O king, selected by my keen sense, acquiring wisdom from whom I wander in the world free. Please hear about them. The earth, the air, the sky, water, fire, the moon and the sun, the dove, the boa constrictor, the sea, the moth, the honeybee, the elephant, the honey gatherer, the deer, the fish, a courtesan named Pingala, the osprey, the infant, the maiden, the forger of arrows, the serpent, the spider, and the bhringa wasp. These 24 have been accepted, O Raja, by me as my gurus. From the conduct of these, I have learned all that I had to learn in this life for my good. I now tell you, O tiger among men, what I learned from whom and how, O son of Yayati, Nahusha's son. Hear it. I imbibed from the earth her vow that remaining unperturbed even while being oppressed by beings following the will of providence, a man should not deviate from his course, conscious of the fact of their being subject to the will of providence. A pious man should learn from the mountain that all his movements should ever be guided by altruism, and that his birth is solely intended for the service of others. As a disciple of the tree, he should learn submission to the will of others. An ascetic should remain fully gratified with bare sustenance after the manner of the life breath, and should not pamper his senses by means of articles which are delightful to them. He should so manage that his cognitive faculty may not be lost through starvation, nor should he indulge himself in such a manner that his speech and mind may be diverted. Though moving freely among and enjoying all sorts of objects of the senses possessing diverse characteristics, a yogi should not get particularly attached to them any more than the air. Any more than the air is to his mind, remaining unaffected by their merits or demerits. Although clothed in earthly bodies in this mortal plane, and appearing as though endowed with their characteristics, an ascetic who has his eyes fixed on the self is not actually endowed with those characteristics any more than the air is with the odors of various kinds, which really belong to particles of earth or solid matter wafted by the air, and not to the air itself. Though clothed in a body, the ascetic should, by identifying himself with the infinite Brahman, visualize the affinity of his all-pervading soul with the sky in the shape of freedom from all limitations and absence of attachment because of its interpenetrating all mobile and immobile organisms at once. The soul is not touched by material adjuncts, which are the creation of Kala and are constituted of fire, water, and earth in the form of their combinations such as food, any more than the sky is constituted by phenomena like the clouds tossed by the wind, which appear in the sky, but the sky is not actually made of them. Bearing close affinity with water, an ascetic is transparent, soft by nature, sweet, and a seat of purity, and purifies people through sight, touch, and sight, touch, and utterance of his name. Full of glory and made brighter by the glow, formidable in having no vessel other than his belly. In other words, he does not have any container to carry food around. If he obtains food, he eats it then and there. He does not carry anything else with him. The yogi, like fire, does not imbibe any impurity, even though consuming anything and everything. He remains hidden from view at times and becomes visible at others, earning the respect of those who seek blessedness, and burning the past as well as the future sin of those who make an offering to him. He eats everywhere that which is offered by others. As fire assumes the shape of the firewood through which it reveals itself. So having entered a particular body, whether it be of a divinity or a subhuman creature, possessed of noble or ignoble characteristics and evolved by his own Maya, the all-pervading Brahman appears endowed with that very form. The various states beginning with birth and ending with death, brought about by the passage of time, whose course cannot be perceived, belong to that body alone, and not to the soul, just as appearance and disappearance, etc., occur only to the digits of the moon, and not to the moon itself. The digits of the moon being the divisions of the apparent disk of the moon. Though taking place every moment by force of time, which flits with the rapidity of a stream of water, the birth and death of bodies assumed by the spirit are not perceived any more than the rising and going out of the flames of fire, which likewise take place every moment. Like the sun sucking the moisture in summer and releasing it during the monsoons by its rays, a yogi engaged in the quest of the spirit enjoys with his senses the objects of the senses and parts with them according to the need of the moment, but is not affected by the act of enjoyment or by having to leave them. As the sun reflected in a reflecting surface is perceived by men of gross understanding differently, as though existing in the vessel, etc., so is the one self clothed in a vesture understood differently by those who recognize the physical body as their self, though in fact the one by itself. Excessive fondness or attachment should never be conceived for any person or object by anyone. The mind of a man who does so becomes unhappy and he comes to grief, like the famous dove of the legend. Having built a nest on a tree, a certain dove lived in a forest with its mate, the female dove, for some years. With their hearts bound through love and enjoying the pleasures of copulation, the pair knit their understanding with understanding, eye with eye, and body with body. Free from fear or reserve in relation to one another, they slept, sat, flew about, stood, chatted, sported, and ate together in the rows of trees of that forest. The male dove, whose senses were out of its control, procured even with hardship whatever enjoyment its mate craved for, inasmuch as the latter gratified it in every way, and was in turn treated with great sympathy. Conceiving for the first time, the female bird, who was devoted to the male, laid eggs, when the time came, in the nest by the side of its mate. At the proper time, there emerged from the eggs fledglings with delicate limbs, evolved by the inconceivable potencies of Lord Sri Hari, and covered with soft down. Hearing their cooing and delighted by their sweet chirping, the pair, fond as they were of their offsprings, nourished them with great affection. The parents derived great joy through the touch of the feathers, pleasant to touch, the sweet chirps and charming movements of their happy youngs, and their coming forth to meet them. With their hearts knit together by mutual affection and deluded by the Maya of Lord Vishnu, the parent birds brought up their young brood with their mind ever distracted. In other words, constantly thinking about their young. Desiring food for their offsprings, the pair, that now had a large family to support, went out in search of it and wandered all about the forest for long. A fowler who roamed about in the forest appeared there by chance. A fowler being a human bird catcher. And seeing the little birds sporting near their own nest, spread his net and caught them. Meanwhile, the male and female doves, who were always anxious to nourish their progeny and had gone out in search of nourishment, returned to their nest with the nourishment. Perceiving its young brood caught in the nest and wailing, the female dove felt extremely miserable and flew to them screaming. Bound by ties of affection bestowed on them more than once through the Maya of the birthless Lord, the female dove, afflicted in mind as she was, forgot that it might likewise be caught in the trap, and even though seeing the little ones entangled, was caught in the trap itself. Sore distressed to find its offsprings, dearer than itself, caught along with its mate, which was as dear to it as its own self, the male dove helplessly wailed, "Oh, behold my ruin, scanty of virtue and evil-minded as I am. Though I am unsatiated with the pleasures of sense and am yet unaccomplished of purpose, my household life, which was the only means of realizing the threefold object of life, has been brought to an abrupt end. My mate that looked upon me as its object of veneration was agreeable to me in every way and was a match for me in every respect, is going to heaven with its innocent, guileless offsprings, leaving me once for all in this desolate dwelling. Such as I am, whose mate and progeny are no more, what for should I seek to survive as a wretched widower, leading a miserable life in my deserted habitat? Seeing them entangled in the net and struggling in the jaws of death, the foolish and feeble-minded dove likewise fell into the trap of its own accord. Having thus secured the male dove, the master of its household, as well as its mate and progeny, the young doves, and accomplished the purpose, the cruel fowler returned home. Maintaining his family in the aforesaid manner, any householder of unquiet mind, reveling in the pairs of opposites, such as joys and sorrows, and attached to the pleasures of sense, comes to grief like the aforesaid dove, with all those connected with him. The wise recognize him as having fallen from a height, on once climbing up to it, who, having attained a human body, which is an open door, as it were, to the mansion of final moksha, remains attached, like the dove, to his household. Thus ends the 7th discourse in Book 11 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 8, what the Avadhuta learned from the next 9 of his many gurus. The Brahmana said, O Raja, pleasure and pain which come through the senses are experienced in heaven as well as in hell by embodied beings. Therefore, a wise man should not seek them. In other words, because they are guaranteed, no matter what you do. You will have pleasurable experiences and painful experiences. Like a python, one should eat food obtained without effort, whether it be more or less, and sweet or bitter. If no food reaches one, then, like the python, let one go without it, and make no effort to obtain it. Let one sleep for many days, patiently believing that it is fate which will provide food. Bearing one's body actionless even when one is strong of body, mind, and senses, and lying down, though sleepless, one should do nothing, though having the strength to exercise the senses. An ascetic should be quiet and grave like the calm, deep sea. He should be inscrutable, dominated by none and unaffected by time and space, and unperturbed by likes and dislikes. An ascetic devoted to the Lord, whether he has or has not the desired objects, should feel neither elated nor depressed, just as the ocean does not swell when rivers flow into it, nor dries up when they do not. When the man who has no control over his senses sees the Maya of the Lord in the shape of a woman, he is allured by her gestures and falls into the darkness of Naraka, just as a moth falls into fire. The ignorant man allured by the gold ornaments, clothes, etc., of a woman for the sake of enjoyment of these objects, which are the creation of the Lord's Maya, loses his discrimination and is destroyed like a moth. An ascetic should take food in small quantities, without giving the householders who provide it any trouble, and barely enough to maintain his body, and thus adopt the course of the black bee. Like the bee collecting honey from many flowers, a discriminating person should gather the essence from all scriptures, great or small. He should not keep in store for the evening or the following day the food collected by begging. His hands alone should be the vessel, and belly alone the receptacle for food. He should not be a hoarder like the bee. A mendicant should keep nothing in store, either for the evening or the day following. He who does it perishes like a bee with that collection. A begging ascetic should not touch, even with his foot, even the wooden figure of a youthful woman. If he touched it, he would be chained, like the elephant brought in contact with a she-elephant. A wise man should never seek a woman who is his death. He might be killed by other more powerful persons, just as an elephant is killed by stronger tuskers. Riches amassed with great pains by misers are neither enjoyed by them nor gifted away. They are enjoyed by some other person, who, like the honey gatherer, discovers the hoard and steals it from the bees. Like the honey gatherer, the ascetic really first enjoys the riches of householders who have amassed them with great pains with a view to enjoying them. An ascetic living in a forest should never hear vulgar songs. He should take this lesson from the deer, which, attracted by the music of the hunter, gets snared. Enjoying the vulgar dance, instrumental music, and songs of women, Rishyasringa, born of a deer, became a plaything in the hands of women. Enraptured by love of taste, a foolish person, through his uncontrollable tongue, is destroyed like the fish by the hooks. Through fasting, wise men can soon control their senses, except the tongue, which becomes more powerful in the case of a fasting person. One may have subdued all other senses, but unless one conquers the sense of taste, one cannot be said to have gained self-control. All senses get subdued when the sense of taste is conquered. Now hear, O prince, what I learned from Pingala, a courtesan, who at one time lived in the city of Videha. One day, that courtesan decorated her person at night, and in order to take her paramour in the pleasure house, she sat just outside the house at the door. O the best of men, on seeing the passers-by, she, desirous of money, took them as rich men seeking pleasure on payment of money. Seeing the passers-by gone, she, who lived upon her solicitations, began to indulge in the hope that some other rich man would come and give her plentiful money. Waiting at the door thus frustrated and having lost her sleep, she kept going inside and outside the house till it was midnight. Her mouth was parched, and she felt dejected through hope for earning money. But ultimately, the sense of frustration leading to happiness dawned on her through thinking as mentioned below. Now duly hear from me the song she sang in her utter disappointment, because for people, dispassion is like a sword to cut asunder the noose of hope. For no person, O Raja, who has not acquired this feeling of disgust for the world would snap the bodily ties, any more than he who was devoid of discretion could give up the sense of minus. Pingala said, Alas, how senseless and of uncontrolled mind am I. Behold the extent of my foolishness. Ignorant as I am, I have expected the fulfillment of my desire from a trifling mean paramour. Forsaking the eternal and real Lord who resides in the heart and gives joy and wealth forever, fondly have I sought a poor man who cannot satisfy my desires and who only gives grief, fear, worry, sorrow, and infatuation. Lo, how uselessly have I afflicted my soul by leading the life of a courtesan and living by such a highly reproachful profession. I expected wealth and satisfaction from a lustful, greedy, and lamentable person through my body sold to him. What female other than myself would find enjoyment through a paramour's body, which is like a house of which the framework is of bones covered with skin, hair, and nails, which is full of urine and excreta and has 9 doors through which constantly flows foul matter? Among the citizens of Mithila, I am the only foolish and wicked person, and that I expect satisfaction from anybody else than the immortal Lord who bestows his own self. He is the friend, most beloved Lord and self of all embodied beings. To him shall I offer myself as a price, and find enjoyment in him, like Lakshmi, who sports with him. To what extent have mortal men, and even celestials, subject to the ravages of time, been able to give satisfying pleasures or enjoyment to their wives? Forsooth, Lord Vishnu has been pleased with me for some action of mine, as in my heart, full of vicious hope, the feeling of disgust for the world has been engendered, which will lead to happiness. Had I been unfortunate, I would not have met with miseries, which have produced the feeling of disgust for the world. It is this despondency through which man attains peace by snapping the fetters of home, etc. Placing on my head the benefit rendered by him and forsaking vicious hopes of sense enjoyments, I shall seek refuge with the said Lord. Feeling contented with whatever I get and living upon it, and trusting the Lord who is my own self, I shall now sport with him as my husband. My soul is fallen in the well of worldliness. The senses have deprived me of discrimination, and I stand devoured by the serpent of time. Who else but the Lord can save me? When one carefully sees the world devoured by the serpent of time, and feels disgusted with worldly objects, one realizes the fact that one's self is the only protector. The Brahmana said, Thus determined, she abandoned the vicious hope born of lust, and resorting to peace, she quietly sought her bed. Hope is the greatest misery, and the absence of it is the greatest joy. For Pingala, getting rid of the hope to get a paramour, enjoyed a peaceful sleep. Thus ends the 8th discourse in Book 11 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 9, story of the 7 final gurus, the osprey and others, and the end of the Avadhuta's discourse. The Brahmana said, The source of misery is indeed the acquisition of whatever men love most. One who knows this and desires no acquisition enjoys everlasting happiness. The stronger ospreys, which had no flesh, attacked the osprey which had it. In other words, flesh of some dead animal that they were eating. The latter then dropped the piece of flesh and felt happy. I feel neither honor nor dishonor. I have no care which householders have for home and children. Like a child, free from care, I wander in the world, sporting in the self and devoted to it. Only two are free from cares and anxieties and are immersed in supreme bliss, the ignorant and guileless child, and he who has transcended the three gunas. In a certain place, a maiden herself had to attend to the comforts of those who came to her house to choose her for a bride, when her relations had gone away to some other place. O Raja, while she was pounding paddy aside to provide them food, the bangles of shells on her wrists made a loud jingling sound. The girl, feeling much ashamed of doing the humiliating task herself, broke the bangles one by one and retained only two each on her wrists. Even the two bangles produced sound as she pounded the paddy. She again broke one each so that the remaining one did not produce any sound. And the following lesson I learned from her, O subduer of enemies, as I wandered in this wide world, to know what was desirable and what was to be shunned. Where many dwell together, quarrel would ensue. Even between two living together, there is talk. Therefore, one should wander alone, as the single bangle on the wrists of the maiden. One should steady the mind on one thing by controlling it as well as the breath, and by acquiring a steady pose and remaining vigilant, practicing dispassion and concentration. The mind is to be steadied on that one, established in which it slowly renounces the desire for actions, and developing the sattva guna controls the rajasika and tamasika impulses, and in their absence attains absorption and contemplation. Just as the maker of arrows, absorbed in his work, did not see the king passing by him, so the man who has concentrated his mind on the self does not know anything inside or outside. Again, an ascetic should wander alone, having no fixed abode, and ever vigilant in living in a cave, unrecognized by obvious marks. He should be without any support and sparing of speech. For man with his perishable body to build a house is useless and fraught with great misery. The serpent happily inhabits the hole borrowed by others, or borrowed from others. The one Almighty Lord, existing by himself and the support of all, destroys this previously created universe through his time energy at the end of a kalpa, and then he remains one alone, quite undifferentiated. When by force of time, powerful in itself, all the energies in the shape of the three gunas get merged in the unmanifest, the most ancient person, the Lord of matter and spirit, attainable by Brahma and other liberated beings, exists. He remains the absolute and unconditioned and self-manifest bliss, fit to be called liberation. O slayer of enemies, with his own unassisted power, he agitates his maya, consisting of the three gunas, and first creates sutra or mahattattva. They say that sutra is the manifestation of the three gunas, capable of creating the universe of multifarious forms through which it runs like a thread, and the individual soul gets into the world. Just as the spider projecting the web from its heart through mouth sports with it and then swallows it, so does the Supreme Lord create. So the Supreme Lord creates, preserves, and destroys the universe. On whatever the embodied being deliberately centers its mind in its entirety through love, hatred, or fear, it attains that very form. O Raja, the larva confined by the wasp in a hole in the wall, and contemplating on the wasp, without discarding its former body, transforms itself into a wasp. O Raja, I thus learned this wisdom from these gurus. Now hear as I tell you what I have learnt from my own body. This body, subject to birth and death and constantly and ultimately a source of afflictions, is my guru, as it promotes renunciation and discrimination. Though it helps me to contemplate on realities, it really belongs to others who will devour it. Realizing this, I wander renouncing all. Man earns money with difficulty in order to enjoy pleasures and maintain the growing number of wives, children, possessions, cattle, servants, houses, relations, friends. Like a tree, which when ultimately destroyed leaves behind seed for another tree to grow, he too dies leaving seeds for his next birth. His tongue drags him to one side, thirst to another, the organ of generation to some other, so do the touch, stomach, and ear in some other directions, the sense of smell in another, and the restless eye to something else. And every physical organ draws him in a different direction. Thus, like the lord of the house torn up by co-wives, his senses and organs pull him on all sides. Having created through his innate energy the bodies of the different species of living beings, such as trees, reptiles, animals, birds, gadflies, fish, etc., gadflies meaning insects in general, the Lord was not satisfied. He rejoiced when he created the human body, endowed with reason and capable of realizing the supreme deity. Having after many births in this world acquired the rare human body, however frail, which is still the means of attaining the object of life, a wise man should speedily strive to attain liberation before this body, constantly subject to annihilation, is destroyed. The enjoyment of sense pleasures can of course be had in all species. Having thus freed myself from all attachments and egotism and developed dispassion, and possessing the light of knowledge acquired from my several gurus, I wander in this world established in the self. Stable and comprehensive knowledge cannot be acquired from one guru. This Brahman, without a second, has been variously sung by rishis. The Lord said, the Brahmana of deep wisdom, having thus spoken to Raja Yadu, and greeted and adored by him, took leave, and delightedly went his way. Having listened to the discourse of the Avadhuta, our remote ancestor, Raja Yadu, rid himself of all attachments, and gained the steady equilibrium of mind. Thus ends the 9th discourse in Book 11 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. And I think that's a perfect place to stop for today. The Uddhava Gita continues, the teachings of Krishna to Uddhava, but that finishes the discourse of the Avadhuta to Yadu, which is the first part of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Devula.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. All right. Jai Gurudev.
Yeah, could I ask a couple questions?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
The Yadus became evil, and the Krishna snagged the Yadas to escape with him to his new land, which was called what?
Oh, Prabhasa. But it's not...
that was so the Yadus became corrupt, and like he grabbed the Yadavas. Is that what went on in that part of the plot?
No, so he's telling all the Yadus and the Yadavas are the same thing. He's telling,
right. That's what I was wondering. But
yeah, just two ways of saying the same thing.
He
is telling the Yadus to come to Prabhasa, but it's essentially a trap. Prabhasa is, we will soon find out the answer to this question in upcoming chapters, but the Eraka grass, the cursed grass that grew from the ground up pestle that was created from the curse of the Brahmanas to destroy the Yadus, has grown along the strand at Prabhasa where the tide washed it in. And Krishna is leading them there specifically for their destruction at that place.
And is this the curse that was put on them when the kids dressed up one of the boys as a girl?
Yes. Yes, although not the curse was not for doing that, but for trying to trick the Brahmanas as like a prank. But the purpose of it and the reason why Krishna arranged for that to happen, because we literally watched Krishna arrange that. He told the sages to go to that hill, then he sent the children there. He orchestrated the whole thing, specifically for the purpose of setting up the destruction of the Yadu clan, which he knows has become too powerful and too proud, and he's already destroyed all the other Kshatriya clans who had become correct and abusive through orchestrating largely the Kurukshetra war. And the only ones that remain for him to finish the purpose of his avatarana is to end the Yadu clan. So he's kind of lining that all up in motion. And indeed, he just told Uddhava that the end is only 7 days away. And he's telling his friend Uddhava how to escape the destruction and how to attain moksha, since Uddhava is at the point where he's going to be able to manage that. Whereas the rest of the Yadu clan is going to be destroyed in 7 days.
Wow. And the Yadu clan was Krishna's parents and stuff?
Yes, his own clan, Krishna's own clan, yes.
Okay. So his parents at this point are passed, left their bodies. Or is he
Not.
parents?
We'll find out about that. His parents have both been promised moksha in at the end of this life. They just they were not quite able to accept Krishna fully as a spiritual divinity and guru to them because of their thinking of him as their child. And so that's why Krishna brought Narada to come in, and kind of the final teaching to them had to come from someone else, because who they didn't see as their own child. So that's why he brought in Narada to tell them the story of Rajanimi and those teachings. And that was like the final stroke to help Vasudeva and Devaki into moksha.
That we just say.
That was it for them. So they're not subject to destruction in an ignorant sense. Whatever becomes of their bodies, it's confirmed that Vasudeva and Devaki are both going to attain final moksha in this life, as will Uddhava and some others. A lot of them who lived with Krishna all their lives are going to get purified by it. But the Yadu clan is huge, and he's making sure not to leave it behind, especially because Krishna knows that the time for Kali Yuga has come and is in fact being delayed by Krishna's presence on the earth, and it's going to set in full force the instant he leaves. And if he leaves behind this giant warrior clan, removes his own guidance from them, and they are subject to the influences of Kali Yuga, they're going to wreak destruction and havoc in the world. And so he's basically cleaning up after himself, since he created this giant clan and empowered them. And he doesn't want to leave it behind, because he knows that it wouldn't go well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, what was the Pandavas clan?
The Pandavas clan was the house of Kuru. But
not Yadu.
Not Yadu. No, they're from a different clan.
Right.
They're cousins. They're interrelated, but it's a different clan. They're part of the Kurus. So in the Mahabharata, you often hear of there's the Pandavas and the Kodavas, but technically the Pandavas are Kodavas. More accurately, it's the Pandavas and the other Kodavas, all descendants of Kuru, just as the Yadavas were all descendants of Yadu. But yeah, the Pandavas now rule currently from their twin capitals of Indraprastha and Hastinapura, whereas the Yadavas were based out of Dwaraka. So they're allied cousin clans. And the Kodava clan has just been cut down to size, so to speak, destroyed as much as Krishna saw fit for it to be through the Kurukshetra war, a civil war within the Kodava clan that Krishna sort of orchestrated.
Wow.
That's why only the Yadu clan remains to be trimmed down, so to speak.
Wow. So the whole Mahabharata, the battle was like part of a similar technique as they then used with the Yadus in this case.
Yes, getting them to destroy themselves through internal strife. Exactly. And that is how the Yadus end up getting destroyed, as we will soon see, is by themselves through internal strife. Yeah, that we're coming right up to that immediately. It's only 7 days away. Immediately after the Uddhava Gita, that's the next thing.
Wow. And now with Dattatreya's discourse, he talks about like, for instance, eat everywhere.
Yeah, that's Dattatreya's way, is to just, in other words, to just wander at whim and eat what you find, essentially, is the path of renunciate asceticism that he prescribes.
Cool. And was that like also meat and stuff, or were they still Ayurvedic, stuff?
Not Dattatreya. Dattatreya doesn't, like, he'll just, whatever nourishment comes to him, like, he won't kill anything. He won't even kill a plant, much less kill an animal. Nice. But if food comes to him, he'll eat it. He's at a level, this isn't at a level of, like, Ayurveda has no relevance to an ascetic on that level. No system of maintaining the body in any particular way or any organized way. He's a renunciate beyond any. He's just like literally just wandering. Like he might lie in one place for days on end. If food comes, great, he'll eat it no matter what it is. If it doesn't, fine. Yeah, like he's totally beyond any such distinction or attachment. It's a.
And was this during his phase of pretending to be a snake or something like that? Like that's wild, like crawling or something like that, or slithering.
The Python mode of asceticism, yeah. The Python mode of asceticism, it's a metaphor. It's not literally pretending to be a snake. What it is the mode of lying in wait for sustenance, which is like, you know, metaphorically the way that a python might lie in wait for food to come to it. It's to express this attitude of not even begging, not even going around begging alms, literally just like sit or lie down somewhere, and if somebody comes to you and brings you food, okay, and that's how you sustain your body. It's like the
is there
sorry, yeah,
is there a name for this technique, for this lifestyle? What would you, is there like you know, Sanskrit word for it or something?
There definitely is, but let's see if I can remember it. I mean, it means
the vegetable state. The
the vegetable state. It means yeah, literally the Sanskrit word for it means the python state, the python's mode of asceticism.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. And so while he's giving this discourse, he's like living the python state lifestyle.
He kind of comes in and out of that extremity. Like sometimes he wanders around rather than lying in place. And he does also talk about, you know, gathering from householders like a honeybee in your pans. So he's not doing the python state 100% of the time, clearly. He kind of does it when he feels like it. And when he doesn't feel like it, he might wander around and accept alms. But it's, you know, he's sort of in a, he's in a state of asceticism that's ungoverned by rules. Like, just like he kept describing it as relating it to being childlike, just like having no organized code that he follows, just wandering without any attachments.
Amazing.
So he kind of will go in and out of the python state as he feels like it.
But a python, when he's hungry, he is aggressive, but this guy is not aggressive.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, he only takes the metaphor so far. He's not literally he's not literally exactly imitating a python in every way.
You know what I like about the destruction part? Maharshi explains it nicely. The collapse and the emergence. That's the time and space is about to end. That's where it collapses, right? No, emerges.
Well, yeah, like the destruction in the sense of like the pralaya, like at the end of a kalpa.
Yeah. So that's exactly the nice way of. I mean, the entire Vedic paradigm is like that. At least that's how Maharshi explains it. Kind of, like that.
Yeah.
So are we reading the Uddhava Gita now?
Yes, this was the Uddhava Gita today, or some of it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah. Great. Thanks so much, Deva. Haribol.
Haribol.